And good morning, everybody. My name is Forrest over here, and welcome back to another live reading stream. Today, for this stream, we'll be continuing where we left off with uh, Slobberknocker, My Life in Wrestling. We're finishing chapter 11 through 20, and then, like I said last night, later on today, I will be reading Percy Jackson and the Olympians. So, we're just going to go ahead and get right straight into it. So without further ado, let's just get right straight into it. Also, it should be doing well. Actually, let me go ahead and get my glasses real quick. I just realized I probably should get them. So that way I don't have to worry about too many different things. There it is. Okay, there we go. That's so much better so I can read comments. Alright, let's go ahead and just get right straight into this. Okay, we're right up close and personal. Chapter 11, Behind the Mic, 1975. It broke my heart, but I moved back to my hometown, population of 800, as wrestling wasn't a steady way to make a living. Driving, hauling rings, changing channels, working in the office, refereeing, and looking after Leroy were all fine for someone who was single and with no responsibilities. But that just wasn't me. I had a wife and child on the way. Even doing all that I was doing in the business, it was hard for me to see where exactly I fit into the bigger wrestling picture. Up until one Wednesday at a Shreveport TV taping. That was the day I finally found something in the business that I knew I could spend my life doing. And it happened because of a mix-up. You think you can handle this? Bill asked me. We were alone in the corner of the small TV studio. I knew he wasn't looking for a maybe or an I'll try my best. He was looking for a firm answer. Yes or no. I didn't even need to think about it. Absolutely, I said. Bill took out some money and gave it to me. I was wearing a short sleeved shirt and slacks. Not suitable for TV. Go buy yourself some TV clothes, he said. His words cemented the fact that I was about to get my break on TV. Bill handed me the money to get properly suited when showtime was fast approaching. No build-up, no fuss, no training, no time to prepare. The lack of communication between KTBS and the office led to neither telling the other that the regular TV announcer, Reeser Bowden, was going to be on vacation for that taping. They had no other announcer, so Bill had no other choice but to try something, and someone new. Me. I rushed across to Dillard's department store and bought a blue blazer, a light blue shirt, and a red tie, because that was what I saw on I saw a TV weatherman wearing. The entire ensemble cost about $50 because I was buying off the rack. The sale rack. As I hurried back, I ran over the format in my head. It was a 1-hour show with 5 commercial breaks and 6 matches, all squash bouts. The studio audience was always approximately 75 people, who were essentially the same faces that came to the same tapings and sat in the same seats. You ready? Watts asked as I re-entered the building at pace. Bill didn't wait for my reply. You want to know the number one rule to making money in the wrestling business? He said. I began to answer, but he again cut me off. The money is in the vertical depth of the roster, unless it's in the horizontal depth. Horizontal depth is where your show features a lot of tag teams or guys who always have to work together. That can make money too. But if you stack the one single match with everything you have, and the fans aren't interested, they're not going to pay to see your show. So there's no money there. Unless you have a hot team or faction, then you make money. You understand, Jimbo? I was barely following, but Bill wasn't waiting for questions or follow-ups. But vertical depth in your roster means that you have a show with 5 or 6 different potential attractions. That's where the money is, because you can present a singles main event with 2 top guys, but if a fan isn't crazy about seeing that match, there are 4 other things on the card that might compel them to buy a ticket. You understand now? This time Bill waited for me to reply. I had no idea what he was saying. The money is in the vertical depth, I said, except for when it's not. Then it is sometimes, but not all the time, especially when you have a great team or a few single attractions. Sometimes, he replied, all that horizontal and vertical depth ideas to just are just general guidelines. I've lived through periods where multiple tag team feuds were the main attractions. The only absolute rule of making money in pro wrestling is this: if it's drawing money, it's a good idea. I was totally lost. Maybe that's what he wanted. There was something in his eye that told me he was trying to overload me, give me too much to think about, to see how I'd react under pressure. Jimbo, he said, you look like you don't know whether to scratch your watch or wait or wind your ass. Huh? He patted me hard on the shoulder one time and said, you lead, Jimbo. Create opportunities for Leroy to contribute. Make sure to get our upcoming dates plugged. Bill laughed as I changed into my newly acquired attire and got my own thoughts together. Despite his verbal peppering, I knew the basic points Watts needed me to get across because I'd always paid attention to our shows. I understood who was feuding with whom and what was at stake. Most of the matches were enhancement matches, what some folks called squash matches, because they each featured a star against a guy who, for whatever reason, was not equipped to be terribly competitive. In any promotion or that in any promotion at that time, it was the announcer's job to believably play up the athletic ability and credentials of the enhancement wrestler so that when the stars beat them, those stars had actually accomplished something. It also fell to the announcer to play up the star in the ring, as well as the man with whom he was presently feuding and what their issues were. In the Oklahoma territory, however, the announcers had an extra task. They had to present all this information while focusing on what was occurring in the ring in an explicit enough fashion that Leroy McGurk, the show's blind color commentator, could visualize it well enough to tag in every now and then to add something. Our money was made purely off of ticket sales to non-televised live events, so star number one would squash a wrestler, then star number two would do likewise, and then we'd have localized interviews about how you could buy a ticket to see the 2 stars square off. I walked into the studio in my new suit and Bill approached. You ready? He asked one more time. I nodded. And I mean it. And I nodded and meant it. I was ready. Can I have my change? He asked. What? That suit didn't cost you $100. He was right. I had rustled through my old trouser pockets and handed him the balance of his investment. Receipt, Jimbo? You could see I was getting a little impatient as I went again into my old trouser pockets. I wanted time to get my head in the game. He said, "Here's the real lesson of the day. Nickels make dimes. Dimes make quarters. Quarters make dollars. And dollars make—" I didn't want to answer. "Dollars make what, Jimbo?" I just wanted to get out of there and into the studio floor. More dollars? No. Dollars make me damned happy. Cowboy smiled and left me to it. Hold on a second, let me get my glasses real quick because it's getting annoyingly fogged up for some reason. Yeah, there you go. I pulled out my metal folding chair and sat in front of the mic stand at the announcer's desk. It was an ordinary piece of furniture, but to me it was like sitting behind the wheel of your very first car. There was a romance to it. I could hear the sounds of all the great announcers from my childhood in my ear. As a boy, I loved listening to the games by myself at night. I had a single earpiece which connected me to my transistor radio, which in turn connected me to an entirely new world of sports. Because of how early we had to get up to do chores on the farm before school, my bedtime at 10 years old was 8 p.m. I'd go to bed with the ear plugged between my ear and the pillow, so when so if my parents poked their heads in the door, they wouldn't be able to see that I was tuned into a baseball or football game. I'd listen to the Cardinals play on KMOX, the St. Louis AM radio station, whose signal carried all the way to Westville. Listening to such broadcast greats as Jack Buck and Harry Carey, it was like the entire culture of sports washed over me. Those guys made me understand the concept of radio as the theater of the mind. They could paint a picture of what was going on, as vivid as any image, televised or live, could be. I felt like I was at Bush Memorial Stadium, and I thought that was a true art form. I could I contrasted the style of the commentators on the radio versus the guys on TV. I started to notice that the TV announcers did not talk quiet as const- did not talk quiet as constantly. They knew their audience was watching the games they were calling, so they could lay out and wait for the big play to make their big call. I looked at my bullet point notes in front of me and tried to find my big call. I knew I wouldn't find it on the page, but I was looking for it because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to feel it. I glanced at the stationary camera operator who would give me my cues. He was ready. I was too. Leroy was already in position, quiet, composed, and ready to go to work. I couldn't help but look down some of his to make sure his crotch was smokeless. For old time's sake. Beverages on the floor, out of sight, someone said as they passed behind me. You ready? Another voice asked. Maybe they all saw a nervousness in me that I didn't feel, but I was too naive to be anxious. Sometimes ignorance truly is bliss. I dipped my head and closed my eyes and tried to summon up the voice of the greatest commentator I ever heard. Gordon Sully. Since I joined the company, I watched the tape of Sully's call of Hito Matsuda beating Danny Hodge at least 60 times in its entirety. Leo Voss sat beside me on every viewing. He told me to listen to how Sully approached the in-ring action with a subtle flair for the dramatic, never taking things to an eyeball-rolling level. It was Gordon's authenticity that made him the most trusted voice in wrestling. He spoke in eloquent terms about holds and particularly body parts, so much so that in college I took kinesiology just so I could sound like him. Sully had a strategy that made many fans forget what they were watching was staged, and that might be the greatest compliment that a pro wrestling broadcaster could receive. I began to protect my opponent. I began to practice my opening to myself at the desk. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Watts, now standing behind me, interrupted. If I wanted Gordon Sully, I would have hired Gordon Sully. What? Be yourself, he said. Leroy sniffed at Watts' critique. Cowboy leaned down closer so only I could hear him. You can learn a great deal from Sully's storytelling, but you need to find your own voice. Approach this like a sport. Don't don't insult the people and put the talent over. Okay. Okay? Cowboy asked. Okay, I said. Leroy turned to me and said, You ready? He didn't wait for me to answer before the countdown began to show time. All these great commentators in my head, all the great plays I'd heard, all the times the greats would lay out and let the pictures do the talking, all the emotional calls and vivid pictures they painted, the gravity of their voices, the command of their craft, and in the small KTBS studio in Shreveport, Louisiana, I was about to take my first step in joining them. And I felt absolutely ready. 3, 2, 1. You did good, kid, Leroy said quietly to the audience as the audience filed out after the taping was over. I saw I was still buzzing, filled with adrenaline. I felt I had done well, and tried to tick all the boxes that Cowboy told me to tick. Neither the camera guys nor the crew were giving me any feedback one way or the other. They were focused on getting home, or to the next town. Not bad, kid, not bad. You've got a lot of work to do, Watts said as he approached. Now get changed, he said. You're refereeing the matches in Baton Rouge tonight. Not only was my weatherman suit bought on sale, but it was also on loan, and it was now time to take it off and go back to my real job. Although Bill's praise was faint, I was happy to hear his words. Got a lot of work to do. Meant I was going to get a chance to do it again. Maybe I found my way out of $125 a week. Maybe I found my calling. Chapter 12. Not Behind the Mic. 1976. Now, finding one's calling and finding an opportunity to continue that calling are two completely different things. I wanted my wrestling journey to fall into place from that moment, that the wrestling gods would smile down upon my round Oklahoma head, and I would call matches forever. It just didn't happen like that. There was only a limited amount of spots available, and I was still the new guy compared to the others. I thought I'd done a good job, but I was only standing in. I soon learned that my real value wasn't in my ability to call matches, but my ability to be an all-rounder. Doing more and doing it well meant my value to the company rose, but I was still struggling to make a living from it. Mid-South, however, was rolling along just fine because Bill loved to keep an iron fist on all parts of the business. He wasn't afraid to put his foot down when he needed, especially with the wrestlers he fought so hard to protect. Most of the boys would take Cowboy's famous finds with their mouths shut, but some wouldn't, like Dick Murdoch. Now, Dick struck me as a loud, obnoxious Texas Longhorn who liked to drink a lot of beer and eat a lot of mayonnaise on his broccoli. But we soon developed a natural chemistry. We both enjoyed our spiritual debates on the OUUT, the Oklahoma, the OUUT rivalry. I'm going to assume that's Oklahoma University of Texas rivalry. I'll be surprised if I actually got that right. But anyway, I think each of us was surprised to find someone on the other side of chasm, that chasm, who could match our own knowledge of players, stats, and other useless trivia. Murdoch was just fun to be around. Maybe sometimes a little too fun. We started traveling together on occasion. He liked to drive, which didn't bother me, but he also liked to drink and drive, which did. When he was in the car, it was country music on the radio, and only country music. He hated guys who smoked pot or did other types of drugs, even though he secretly, occasionally enjoyed speed, which was how he could drive all night while drinking beer after beer and still remain alert. Hey Jim, you hear about my check? He asked me one night as we drove to the next town. No, Dickley, I haven't heard anything. Well, he said, Watts did it to me again, but I'm gonna get even. He's not gonna get away with it this time. I was starting to have flashbacks to Leroy wanting to kill Ted DiBiase when Dickley yelled, Well? Well, what? I asked. Don't you want to know what I'm going to do? He said. Not really. Look at that, he said, ignoring the road and throwing me his check. I opened the envelope, removed the paycheck, and saw Murdoch's pay for the shows he worked, and then a space for a draw, or an advance payment, and finally a space for fines. Dick had a hell of a week with $6,000 earned, because he'd been late to almost every town, and he'd clowned around in at least a couple of that week's main event matches. You know how much he fined me? Dickie asked. How much? I asked. Everything, except one fucking dollar. I looked again, and sure enough, the check to Dickie said $1. Seeing Murdoch seethe was actually kind of funny, but I knew if I laughed, he'd probably kill me for real. He wanted to teach me about being professional, he said. So here's what I'm going to do. I was bracing for the worst because I was in an awkward situation. I worked for Bill, but liked Dickie a lot. You know how meticulous Bill is, he said. He accounts for every dollar and every cent. He never misses a detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm never going to cash this check. Dickie looked at me with the biggest shit-eating grin I had ever seen in my life, but I didn't get it. He continued. For the rest of his life, the son of a bitch will never be able to balance his checkbook. Eventually it'll drive him crazy, and he might end up killing himself or something good like that. Murdoch's blue eyes sparkled as he flashed a smile of victory. He took the check to his bar in West Texas, Dick's Dive, and had it framed and posted on the wall. I learned as I watched him that Dickie had few equals as a wrestler. When he was motivated, Lee was 6'5" and 275 pounds, and never lifted weights. He was just a naturally brilliant performer. He had it in him to be as good as anyone I ever saw, and prided himself on making the other guy look good. And in a completely different way, that's what I wanted to do when I got the chance too. I wanted to make the guys in the ring look better, perhaps than they actually were. Going into the events, I was calling the matches in my head, microphone or no microphone. I was intrigued and I was imagining what I would say about the wrestlers to the audience at home. Night after night, I was coming up with the new ways of explaining who those wrestlers were and why you should care. I imagined my dad in front of me, and I would explain to him that the stakes were just like our day, what the stakes were, just like our days at home. Over and over, phrasing, cadence, tone, lift, drama, I'd bring the viewer in and reel them back out again. I'd envisage elevating my voice to complement the story in a match and then fade out again when the unfolding story called for it. I noticed that many of the wrestlers who came through required a lot of selling from the announcers, and then there were some guys who needed hardly any, like Stan Hansen, and his fellow West Texas University alum Frank Goodish, aka Bruiser Brody. Both men had reputations for being difficult for some promoters to work with, but I liked Hansen and Goodish right from the start. They were tough ex-football players who were just naturals in the ring. Watt's only gripe with them was that both men wanted to stay together as a tag team, while Bill saw a lot more money in them as singles attractions. They were so opposed to that plan that they eventually gave notice. The irony was that in their last weeks with us, Bill split them anyway, and they both flourished. I called every match and every move without being anywhere near a microphone. Murdoch, Brody, Hanson, Hodge, Sweeten, or whoever. I wanted to be good enough when the time came to call all their matches and elevate all their moves. And as Hanson and Brody packed their bags for another territory, they weren't the only duo who split up under Cowboys' watch. Chapter 13. Trying to Stay in Wrestling, 1979. Bill Watts and Leroy McGurk were never a match made in heaven. Leroy was stuck in the old school way of doing things, while Watts was looking to the future of the business. Leroy was surrounded by old timers hanging around the office, trying to hold on to any kind of payday, while Watts was on the road working the main events and trying to grow the business. Bill would book the shows only to find out that Leroy had changed them, based on the advice Leroy was getting back at the office. Things were obviously getting ropey between both men, and it was a situation that I didn't want to find myself in the middle of. So I kept my head down as much as I could and did my job. Or jobs. But like most things that turned sour at the top, it was a way of turning everything underneath the same way too. Because I was a Watts guy, I was about to find out just how sour. Watts and McGurk finally reached the point that they just couldn't stand each other any longer, so they split the territory. Leroy took the northern half, Oklahoma, plus a few towns in Arkansas, northern Texas, and southern Missouri, while Bill took Louisiana and Mississippi, the states that would form the core of Mid-South wrestling. Much to everyone's surprise, I stayed in Oklahoma, Leroy's turf, because I had complex family issues unfolding there. I had just been through a divorce, which I knew was my doing, and I wanted to be closer to my daughter. I was still infatuated with the wrestling business, but was also realistic about where it was going with the two bosses at war. Without Bill to keep a lid on the prevailing shenanigans, Leroy's office quickly devolved into a political cesspool with all the old stooges tattling on each other, trying to curry favor. The more power the stooges gained, the more I could feel myself getting squeezed out. Watts' boy was not loyal to the cause. What cause exactly, I didn't know, as most of the paranoia going around was stirred up from nothing but whispers and alcohol. I was still seeing to my duties and doing my best to be a good employee, but I couldn't help but feel that I was made to fulfill tasks that Leroy's sycophants wanted to go awry for me. They'd send me to the airport to pick up higher maintenance wrestlers without smartening me up on to their real names. So I found myself standing at arrivals looking for Dick the Bruiser, Indiana's top wrestling star, without even knowing what to call him. Hello, Mr. Bruiser. My name is Jim Ross, and Leroy McGurk sent me to pick you up, I said as I approached him at the gate. Dick, with an unlit cigar clamped down between his teeth, looked me up and down before answering. How'd you know it was me, kid? The airport wasn't exactly full of 5'10", 280-pound men with the flat top haircuts and massive traps, so I had an idea that this might be my guy. Well, sir, I said, I've seen your picture in the magazine and I'm a huge fan. Even before I got into the business, you were also always one of my favorites. One of? He asked. One of your favorites? Shit. Bruiser smiled a little and we walked to the car together. Dick F. Dick Atlas, He muttered. What's that, sir? I asked. My name is Dick Atlas. Mine is Jim Ross. I know. You told me. Shit. It's okay, kid. Dick and I became best buddies. At least for that trip. But I knew I needed to add another string to my bow to keep the axe from falling. And the only thing wrestling bosses loved more than getting their asses kissed was getting their pockets lined. So I found a way to make myself even more useful. I would run my own one-off shows, known as spot shows, and bring Leroy in as a partner. It was like free money to him, because he didn't have to do anything for his slice of the pie. I figured it was a good time to be in the spot show business, because with Bill taking half the area, Leroy needed new towns to run in order to keep things going 5 or 6 nights a week. I put together a brochure that explained what wrestling could draw and how the shows worked, and I sent copies to nearly every local nonprofit organization in Oklahoma and Arkansas, from chambers of commerce to Kiwanis clubs to the JCs. If a group decided to do it, I'd get with Leroy and we'd work on everything from the date to the building we'd book. Leroy would come up with a line of matches that based on who was available on that date, and I'd compose the TV plugs and make sure they were running in the appropriate markets. I had a feeling this could do well because it was a rare chance for folks in smaller towns to see the stars from TV. Our cards would usually be the first wrestling events the smaller towns had in months or years, and in a lot of cases, the first one ever held in those localities. It was my plan to leave nobody disappointed, from the sponsors to to the popcorn vendors. Even in the Fayetteville, Arkansas, arena where they didn't have concession stand vendors set up, I went to Walmart and bought cases of canned sodas, bologna, and bread, and we had one of the ring crew guys' wives selling bologna sandwiches and cokes to hungry fans. I also went back to what brought me to the dance in the first place, hooking up the non linking up with non-profit groups. They would get the free advertising and radio spots, and in return, we'd give them 20% of gross, and they'd cut the money from food and beverages. After they paid us $250 for the ring, of course. Leroy and I would get 80% of the gate, of which we paid the town about 35% cash before they left the venue, and then Leroy and I would split the remaining monies 50-50. I borrowed a buddy's pickup truck to haul around the ring. I had a small crew in my hometown that helped me set up for shows, putting up the ring and arranging the audience's seats. I also refed the matches, managed the money, and booked the matches' finishes. The Office Stooges hated my shows, which were making good money and being well advertised. Most of the wrestlers preferred working my shows too, as I made sure to have complimentary catering, hot water, and free towels for them when they came in. The boys loved the little bit of pampering and TLC that came with working on my shows. One of my most successful stretches came when I promoted a series of shows featuring the McGuire twins, Billy and Betty. The brothers were best known as the Guinness record holders for heaviest twins at 600 plus pounds apiece. They became semi-famous when a picture of their gargantuan forms on mopeds began to appear in the newspapers. I knew from time to time they also worked as wrestlers, coming in as special attractions because they were far from skilled in-ring performers. But that picture of them on the mopeds was one that every newspaper within 100 miles of one of our shows was willing to publish, and the image made the twins enough of a curiosity that they could draw a crowd. Having that image was a major plus because I was running on shoestring budget. The Maguires' opponents were Siegfried Stank and Bob Sweetum. Stank was portraying an evil German stereotype, which had been a powerful role for a heel in the early 1950s and 60s. In real life, the sneering Nazi villain was native Texan Bill Lemon, a good guy All American football player at Texas Lutheran. How Bill tolerated his partner, I'll never know, because Bob Sweetin, as I knew well by now, was one of the most cantankerous human beings I had ever encountered. Since our card games, him taking liberties with me in the ring, and his resulting run in with Hodge, Sweetin had gotten even more miserable in the few years since I'd last seen him. I don't know whether I was happy or not to find out that his bullying wasn't just limited to me, not by any stretch. Sweetin also took advantage of job guys, wrestlers just passing through, or locals, the guys who are least likely to say anything that could make waves for a top heel. He also took liberties with the McGuire twins. He took advantage of their lack of experience in the ring and just beat the shit out of them. I knew by now that wrestling was a tough physical sport, but if you're going in with the intent of hurting your opponent, you're in the wrong field. I was the referee and saw firsthand just how brutal the shots were. I tried to interview, but Sweeton was not exactly of a mind to heed my feeble warnings. So he took his time at making himself look like the baddest guy around, and when it came time to finish, he would tackle his partner, Stank, or get pinned after squashed by one of the huge twins. Lemon didn't mind doing the job, both because he knew we wouldn't be back in the same little town for a while, and because he was a professional. Sweeton, on the other hand, was a piece of feces. He operated how he wanted because he knew he enjoyed the protection of Grizzly Smith, Leroy's right hand man. Grizz and Sweeton were friendly, as they had a few things in common, including an interest in very young females. Leroy had even told me that he had to stop running Tex- Texarkana as part of a deal to allegedly get grits out of a change involving a young girl there. And since part of Grizzly's job was to make the house shows and report back to the office, he was always in close enough contact with minors for something that had to happen. Parents would drop their kids off at the shows, and because we hit the same towns weekly, it was easy for young ladies to figure out what restaurants the guys visited and what hotels they occupied. In that environment, someone with a perversion could easily become a predator. Hmm. All right. I learned a lot from Leroy and Watts, but I'll never understand why they were willing to keep grits on. I understood why he had appeal as a wrestler. There weren't a lot of 6'10" guys around, much less one who understood psychology, and Grizz knew the business. But there had to come a point where the rewards of a good date were outweighed by a person's proclivities. I wanted to ask, Leroy, you still got this man on payroll after all this? Why do you keep using him? But I didn't. I didn't feel like it was my place. I still remember the first time I became acutely aware of Sweeten's part in it, and that memory still makes me nauseous. We were waiting to do some interviews at the local station after a show at Fort Smith, Arkansas, one night, and one of the sponsors was there with his wife and little girl, who was maybe 12, to meet the wrestlers. Someone muttered to me, I could make her purr like a kitten. I leaned toward Sweetin, mortified that the sponsor might overhear this discussion, and said quietly, well, that might not make her husband too happy. He said with a smile, I'm not talking about the mother. Sweeton liked to take advantage every chance he got, even if it was with a pair of 600-pound brothers. You guys coming out? I asked very softly as that so that no one else in the locker room could hear. The twins had the twins had been in the showers an awful long time, and I was on the other side of the door wondering if they were okay. I had just gotten off the plane or gotten off the phone with Leroy and told him the situation. His words to me were, "Do whatever you want to do to make sure those boys facilitate their bookings with us." He meant it, and I knew he meant it. The moment, the more time I spent outside the door, the more it started to become obvious to the boys that a situation was arising. But nuisance, I didn't want to get back to Leroy's stooges. Bill, no, wait, Billy, Benny, you guys doing okay in there? I went through the does sign. Still, still, no answer. As long as sure as they were able to. They were also safe, soft-hearted, soft-hearted guys who didn't like re- real-world conflict. There was big stars, and they were big for sure, but not tough in the slightest. Hmm. Starting to feel a little tired. Oh, shit. Sweeton had gone so hard down them that both men were crying in the ring as the match played out. When they came backstage, they said nothing and headed for the shower. I knew this was a bad situation. Now, even though Billy and Benny weren't the greatest in-ring grapplers in the world, they were an attraction in the main event of the shows. I had lined up. Without them, my grades would flop, and not only would I not have any money for Leroy, I wouldn't be able to pay the other wrestlers that they what they were used to either. I could see everyone in the locker room was watching and listening, even though they pretended they weren't. I needed some time alone with the brothers to see what we were going to do. So I did the only thing I could think to do in that situation. I opened the door and went into the shower. It was three husky gentlemen sandwiched into a small, hot, steaming shower room. Okay, guys, I said, trying to avoid the splash of running water on it as the as it hit the tiled floor, I should say. Yeah. Judging by their non-reaction to my appearance, whoa, freaking phone camera. Judging by their non-reaction to my appearance, I guess both guys didn't seem to mind my joining them on this particular evening. You guys doing okay? I asked as I tried not to see things that a man can't unsee. Too late, I saw it. Well, both. It is, to be exact. Neighborhood. Neither neither bother answered me, but I could see that they were bruising up pretty good and uh, frightened too. That guy is an asshole. I said about Sweeten. I promise you that here you now has. You, hold on a second. That guy is an asshole. I said to Sweeten. I promise you here and you, I promise you here and now that you won't ever have any. Let's see, you won't have any step in the ring with him again. You've got your guys are also revolving. Also, you guys also you guys are also, everyone is coming to see. Batman villains are so hard to see. The statement made to work a little trade as Benny nodded digitally. And so how about I throw in a cheese pizza, making sure for your sake, for your meals too, I added. In a legend, well, in a legend, uh, setup. Are you going out? Riley looked to his brother. Wait, Riley, what? Billy looked to his brother and they came to an accidental understanding, having to say something. I was thinking, please don't drop the damned soap. What do you say? What do you say? I asked. You want to finish up here? We go out for something to eat. A little nod from the Broaches. They weren't happy, but they were coming around. Okay then, I said as I turned to leave. Jimbo, Billy said as soon as he zipped me. Will you wash our backs? Excuse me, sir? Billy explained. You usually keep each other, you usually help each other out. Benny's arm isn't doing so good. Will you? Benny asked. Your backs? I said. Yeah. Alright then. Yeah. Wait, hold on. Hold on, I messed up there. Will you? Benny asked. Your backs? I said. Yeah. Wash them? Yeah. Mm, and did I? With The Office, watching and my upcoming shows on the line, and yeah, you bet your ass I did. My first expectations of the talent relations had me staying fully declothed. It's the shower with in the shower with two naked clothes poured when adding who were sobbing as I scooped up in a sponge, ready to wash them down. I knew at that moment that I'd be in the wrestling chair beanies forever. Alright, I'm gonna do something real quick. I'll be right back. Gonna get me some tea. Be right back. Alright. I have returned. Got me something to drink. Some A&W root beer. Go ahead and take a minute, some drinking this. I really love the A&W root beer. It's so good, so good. Oh, excuse me. Let's take one more drink. Why not? Just in case. Alright. Back to the book. Chapter 14. Out of the Business. 1979. 2 weeks later, I was out of the wrestling business. McGurk's stooges got to me. Or got to McGurk. They convinced the old man that I was too loyal to Watts and that I wasn't a team player, so they lengthened my loops and kept my pay at $25 to $40 a day. The longer Cowboy was gone, the longer my trips became. If there was a back road long ass journey to be made, then I was the one who was making it. Grizz, who had McGurk's ear more than anyone, made it his mission to starve and frustrate me out of the business. And eventually, it worked. Life on the road was never ending, and I looked as if I had aged significantly before my parents' very eyes. The miles, staying in the flea bag motels, eating unhealthy fast food was putting years on my body. I was also deep into bad personal habits, such as drinking more nights while driving and experimenting with various drugs to better fit in with the boys. The drug culture, mixed with the lies and drinking, was destructive to say the least. And it was sure doing a number on me and my personal relationships. At times I was having a lot of fun, too much fun, as I lived a life of irresponsibility filled with foolish acts. Being away from home and earning virtually no money was almost like being a prisoner to the business that I loved, even though I had forgotten why I loved it. I knew that if I continued to be one of the boys, without Hodge and Akbar to mentor me, the end result was going to be a disaster. I had a young family who, even though I wasn't living with, I still I still needed to look after. I had bills that were waiting to be paid, and responsibilities above and beyond myself. I decided that I could no longer travel as much as I did, work as hard and as long as I did, for as little as I did. I had already made enough really bad decisions, which led to both mental and physically abusive behaviors. I was trapped and I had to escape, or lose everything. A few years before, back home in Westville, the president of People's Bank, Mr. Earl Squires, approved a loan for me to come home and buy my grandparents' mercantile store, but only if I was going to be a full-time owner who was on site daily. That particular stipulation was going to be easier to fulfill, seeing as my wrestling days looked numbered. My parents and friends were happy that I was settling down, as none of them really understood my fascination with pro wrestling or the lifestyle that came with it. For my dad, returning home was like I had finally come to my senses. He was happy to see me get planted in one place and get on with a normal life. I wasn't as happy, or happy at all. Once I was home, I buried myself in local charity work, Little League baseball, and other civic activities. I officiated high school and college sports, which allowed me to escape the department store and go back to the athletic field. I even presided over the high school state championship games, but nothing could hold my attention for long. Truth was, my heart was broken. I was trying to do all the right things for all involved, but me. I was restless and missed life on the road. I was obsessed with wrestling and just couldn't shake it, couldn't kill it off. Occasionally, I'd cover for Cowboy when the regular commentator was off, or I'd help run some spot shows with McGurk. But I had little more than a toe in the water, so to speak, and that was even more frustrating. I had spent the last few years with my eye on the business I wasn't truly in, and neglected a marriage I was. Now that I was settled, I was going to try marriage again. To say that I could have handled things better with my relationships would be an Andre the Giant sized understatement. Even though the women in my life changed, the issues within myself had not. So marriage number two started as rocky as the first one ended. Son, you just might not be the marrying kind, my dad said to me one night as we sat under otherwise silently. It was hard to disagree. For a couple of years I fumbled around, clearly searching for something that I couldn't find, making mistake after mistake along the way. Added to my terrible run of events was the foreclosure of my store. Walmart had become my competitor, and there was no way, no how, I was winning that particular battle. I stood one last time at the back of the store, where my fellow townspeople had come for decades to tell their stories and eat their homemade sandwiches. I turned off the lights and locked the door, and thought of how many times I visited my grandparents there as a kid. I walked to my car with my head bowed. I was ashamed and beaten down. I couldn't possibly think how I could feel much worse about myself and what my life had become until I filed for bankruptcy. It was then that I found out that my mom had secretly mortgaged her own home to secure my loan for Mr. Squires. To see what she did made my failure all the more heartbreaking. I didn't think I deserved a mother like that. Not then. Not when I had messed up so bad in my personal life and fell so flat so hard in my business life. But she loved me. Maybe a little too much. When I asked her why she'd do such a thing for me, she said, I wanted to do my part, and I don't give a damn about the money. I want you home, and I want you to stay home. She could see what having my eye on the road was doing to me. My mom knew me better than anyone, and all 90 pounds of her was going to do everything she could to keep her boy, even if he was now a 27-year-old man, away from the dangers she saw in the wrestling business. Jimmy, she said with her eyes full of tears, I can't stand to see you like this. I could see she was hung on the notion of me being home and staying home. She saw what being on the road did to me, how it affected me. The short temper, the edginess, the withdrawals I was going through to get myself back in the business. I had come from nowhere to find myself in a job in a business that only a tiny percentage of a tiny percentage got to see. And now I was back home, population 800, and I felt like the circus was leaving town without me. Maybe staying put was for the best. I had no real other choice anyway. Wrestling wasn't calling, and I couldn't figure out how to get back in. I was lost. There you go. Chapter 15. Getting back in. 1982. Jimmy? The familiar voice said over the phone. I need you to put together some ads for me. It was Cowboy, and I could tell by his voice he was in a real good mood. So he should have been. Things were looking up for Watts in the wrestling business. The Houston territory had just joined the Mid-South territory out of necessity for Houston promoter Paul Boesk, as his roster wasn't particularly deep and the star names he did have were getting old. Historically, Boesk had run Houston as basically a one-city region which pulled in wrestlers from all over the country. But months after aligning himself with Joe Blanchard's Southwest promotion, which was based in nearby San Antonio, Texas, Boas was having issues getting talent to Houston events. Meanwhile, Mid-South, with Cowboy Bill Watts at the helm, boasted a crew of young, talented wrestlers like Jim Duggan, Jerry Stubbs as the masked Mr. Olympia, and Teddy Biasi. Both needed to partner up to survive, and Watts got to add a big money town to promote in. Win-win, for Watts at least. I've got something big cooking and I need to get the word out, Cowboy said. I was sitting in my new job at the Tulsa radio station KTFX. It was 8 a.m. My show had just ended, but my radio workday was just getting underway. Not only was I an on-air talent, but I also sold advertising at the station. Help get the word out, I asked. I was thrilled to hear from him. Cowboy and I hadn't kept in touch all that much since I left the business. Yeah, I'm coming your way, Watts replied. He could hear the confusion in my voice. I bought Leroy out. The Oklahoma territory is mine now. Leroy's gone? I asked. Yep. I'm coming back to Oklahoma, he said. Wrestling was coming back into my life, but I had another offer on the table. The senior managers who'd brought me aboard KTFX had both moved over to a news station, K95 FM, or KWEN, and wanted me to be their first hire, as a salesman. Maybe I could marry my new radio offer with my first love, professional wrestling, I thought. Can you help me out? Cowboy asked. So rather than pick between Cowboy's ads and my new job offer, I brought Watt's business with me when I decided to move to K95 FM. With McGurk's tri-state a thing of the past, Bill was looking for someone in the Tulsa market to help him get Mid-South Wrestling established in the minds of fans, and that meant advertising. Before long, I was helping him craft and place ads throughout Oklahoma, and I was starting to feel alive again. I really didn't understand just how much I missed the wrestling business until it tiptoed back into my life again. Watts knew he had the talent and the booking skills to continue expanding. Watching his show from the sidelines, it wasn't hard to see that Cowboy was right. A gentleman by the name of Sylvester Ritter, who was storming up the ranks, was not necessarily the most polished performer in the ring, but his incredible charisma was making him, as the Junkyard Dog, one of the hottest heroes in wrestling. With JYD, Cowboy had a special person with incredible strength and a rare presence that Watts and his booker Buck Robley played planned everything else around. They wanted to continue to create the best possible issues for JYD to overcome, issues that would resonate on the human level with the fans. A couple of years before, they got JYD to the top of the business when the fabulous Freebirds, Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Roberts, blinded JYD using their hair removal cream that accidentally got into his eyes. To the fans, the villainous birds had deliberately blinded the hero, but Hayes, an awesome talker, swore it was an accident, that they had been trying to remove his hair, but JYD moved, causing the cream to go into his eyes. The Freebirds' denials left Mid-South brass unable to prove their intent, which meant the dastardly threesome wouldn't be sanctioned. JYD's only justice would come when his friends took on the Freebirds in bouts that drew thousands of fans, hoping to see JYD's friends exact revenge on his behalf. Of course, no one was able to avenge him, so months later, Dog himself came back for a match with Freebird mouthpiece Michael Hayes. JYD, still blind, got in a dog collar bout in which both men wore leather collars that were connected by a length of chain. JYD couldn't see Hayes, so he needed a way to getting a hold of him. That match headlined at the New Orleans Superdome, drawing more than 30,000. Mid-South's biggest crowd ever. I got to learn that number was close, but maybe not perfectly accurate, as wrestling was known for trumpeting crowd figures that were always embellished to some degree. Watch for the old rule of wrestling and promotion in general. Say it enough times, and it moves from fantasy to fact. The old promoters all did it. Fritz von Erich did it in Texas, Vern Gagne did it in Chicago, and Watts did it in the Superdome shows. Figuring out how best to meet Bill's advertising needs also coincided with the realization I'd made about several of my other radio ad clients. If I ran my own ad agency, I could create and broker my own ad packages to bring to the media outlets myself. This would save my clients 15% or more based on what they were paying for local ads in each market, and I would also come out way ahead financially. It took me a couple of years to pull everything together, but I got my own company on its feet, and I was finally doing better, feeling better, getting uh, getting to enjoy my normal life. My second marriage was was more stable because I was somewhat more settled too. We had a new child, a new home, and a fresh start. I ended up with a dozen clients, one of which was Mid South Wrestling. What did you think of the show last week? Cowboy asked me over a quick coffee. I I like it. I said I would. Uh, I didn't even read that paragraph before it. Uh, I just want to read the paragraph I was on before I made that mistake, and then we'll do that. Go to that. What did you think of the show last week? Cowboy asked over a quick coffee. I was now renting the office space from Bill in his building, and it wasn't unusual for us to meet up to go over new and ad ideas, or for him to deliver a check for work completed. I liked it, I said. I would I would like to come work for me, Jim, he asked before I could finish my sentence. I was stunned, but my body felt head to toe with a rush of adrenaline, just at the mere thought of it. I wanted more than anything to get back to the business I loved, to get back to ringside, to get back on the road that aged me. Before I could answer, Watson continued. Things are no things are getting bigger, and I want you to come aboard and as the director of marketing for Mid South Sports. Yes, I said immediately. Yes, he asked, a little surprised at the speed at which I replied. Yes, I repeated. I knew it wasn't the job I wanted. I knew it was an offer that I could sell to all the other people who wanted me to just settle down, my wife included. I was back in the wrestling business, but not back in the wrestling business. I'm the marketing guy. I'm back. So, but not back in. But not back in. Now let me doing my glasses again real quick. There we go. Alright. Alright. Chapter 16. Back in Mid-South, 1984. It felt good to be home. TV tapings were the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana, with Reeser Bowden as ring announcer and Boyd Pierce as host of the TV show. I knew I'd have to wait for my opportunity to get back in as part of the show. It might take months, but I was willing to wait years. Excuse me. See. You still interested in broadcasting, Jim? Cowboy asked straight off the bat. What? You heard me. Yes, I did hear him. Loud and clear. You bet your ass I'm still interested, I replied. I'll start you back as a ring announcer. You have experience there. Then we'll see how you go, he said, and he walked off. He said as he walked off. I looked around the studio. The ring, the cameras. It was small, dark, and but felt like home to me. I knew what other people wanted me to be, people I loved, but I also knew what I wanted to be, or more importantly, where I wanted to be, and that was in the wrestling business. Within weeks, Watts was looking for more ways to utilize me as a to utilize me at televised events. My advertising and promotion of his events were going well, and he told me he wanted another set of eyes and ears on his products basically that he valued my opinion. His words gave me confidence, especially when I was just making my return to the business. The weeks built into months and time blurred as I submerged back down the rabbit's hole. Within a year, Cowboy had another quiet conversation with me as I walked into the studio and he was on his way out. You heading somewhere? I asked, as it was unusual to see a cowboy leave when the day was only starting. I want to try something new on the promos, Jimmy, he said. I want you to be the interviewer. You're already doing all the publicity, so you know what we need to put out there. I was thrilled, but a bit shocked. These local promos were the lifeblood of the company. They were our best, most director's route to the fans at home, who while we were trying to convince to buy our invite to the to convince to buy our live event tickets. And these tickets also went the only revenue stream we had as a company. If no one came to see the shows, then there then no one in the company got paid. Whatever you need me to do, I replied. You can show me what you want. I'm not going to be involved, he interrupted. You're in charge. I paused. Me? Yeah, you. He replied as he turned to leave. Just me? Yeah, just you. I stopped talking as some of the wrestlers walked past us into the building. What's the matter? He asked. Won't other people mind if I start telling them what to do? I whispered. Hopefully, he laughed. Shake things up a bit. And with that, he was gone. I had only been assisting with the promos for a few months and doing some on-air work since I returned. I worked faster than Resor, which saved Cowboy money, which meant he liked me for doing the job more. As my value grew to Bill, my relationship with one of his brothers, main lieutenants, one of his other relationship with one of his other main lieutenants, was getting worse. Grizzly Smith had become one of Bill's backstage agents shortly after Bill split off from Leroy. We never really got along, and that situation only got worse when the Cowboys started entrusting me with greater responsibility. Grizz started seeing me, the guy he drove out of Leroy's company, as a as a threat to his position in Bill's inner circle. Getting the nod from Cowboy to be in charge of the promo tapings wasn't going to do anything to change that. I walked into the studio and all the wrestlers were there. Junkyard Dog answered my nervousness, shouted, "Where's the hat, Jim?" referring to the referring to the Watt referring to Watts, who always wore his big Western helmet, subdued or outside by his sister Jim, uh, as responsible that he wore his long Western hat outside his house to maintain the cowboy persona. He lived his gimmick. My work broke a little as I replied to Dog. I'm running the interviews today. There was a female chuckle from the wrestlers. Grady couldn't keep couldn't resist saying it. Yeah, Jim's running interviews today. He said in a sarcastic tone here. This might be good. This 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 enough to be good. Hmm. There was 10. Hmm. Hmm. See. It was 10 a.m. when I walked past a studio full of tired, hungover, road-worn wrestlers who knew these promo spots would take up most of the day. We weren't there to record one or two. We had to record dozens based on what towns and cities were on our keep. You ready? The cameraman asked. I knew all my tears were on ice. From even though those interviews were hangly speculate speculations. Is that even a word? I guess. Let's see. Each face shared a theme minusculely concerning the dots that sexually and that was then was sexually wait, what back hold on hold on hold on. Each featured a 3-minute interview slot that was usually to capture the hold on a second. I'm getting confused here. Each feud shroud shared a 3 diameter interview shot that was usually compa- captured or to take. Although sometimes there were issues have stayed up that special and diffness from the happening. Smash was the one they needed. Happening. Some of these issues I had contending from a mile away, while others screamed. Others weren't so obvious. mm. Hmm. You know what? See. You know what? Normally I don't do this in the middle of a chapter, but I'm gonna go ahead and stop it right there. I'm getting a little tired already. So, I'll go ahead and put this here. I will go ahead and in the stream. I'll go back to reading this in about an hour. Right now I just need to wake up. So we're gonna finish this for real in about an hour. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, so with that all being said, ladies and gentlemen, I know this is a bit abrupt, but thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and until next time, this is Forrest Walpole signing off.